Congressman Mike Pence from Indiana. Congressman, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Hey, Dylan, good to be with you.
Walk us through the logic that you see toward this particular proposal's ability to create jobs for Americans soon.
Well, with regard to what Leader Boehner was talking about, I think it's what, I'm hearing all over Indiana. I frankly think I heard last Thursday when I was in Cleveland and the 4 states I visited in the last 2 days. People want to see Washington get spending under control, stop crowding out private lending with all this runaway spending, deficits and debt. And for heaven's sakes, let's have some bipartisan agreement this fall to make sure that no American sees a tax increase on January 1, 2011. John Boehner made a good faith offer today for a bipartisan measure that we would pass through the Congress this fall that would at least create some certainty in the marketplace about spending and about taxes in the short term. And unfortunately, the president went to Cleveland today and rolled out kind of the same tired partisan rhetoric. And I think ultimately the president missed a real opportunity today to reach back to Republicans in the Congress and say, okay, we may have large philosophical differences, but here are a few things we could do in the short term that would restore confidence to our economy and start creating jobs.
How is it more than election year rhetoric to talk about cutting spending, whether it's by Republicans or Democrats, when you exempt defense, Social Security, and Medicare, which make up 75% of the budget? The Republican plan exempted that. The Democrats exempted. Politically understandable, but if you leave 3/4 of the budget intact, right? Yep. What are you really achieving?
Well, look, when the Republicans passed our budget, or at least voted through our budget a year ago, we dealt with entitlement reform, we dealt with domestic spending, and you're absolutely right that when we turn the page on this year, whatever the American people decide to do with their Congress, Dylan, we've got to put everything on the table to put our fiscal house in order. What John Boehner offered this morning, though, was really an effort to say, look, how about we just take domestic spending back down to 2008 levels and freeze it there, and then why don't we at least pass a 2-year extension so that no American sees a tax increase in January of this year? And unfortunately, the president just seemed to bat that offer back. He mentioned John Boehner about 7 different times in the speech. And look, I'm in politics. I get the tough rhetoric, but the rhetoric of the president's speech today didn't exactly invite Republicans back to the table.
When you look at the math of the proposal, though, and this is where I take issue, honestly, both with the Republican proposal and the Democratic proposal. They're different proposals, but I see both of them as incredibly impotent. $36 billion in non-defense. If you go back to 2008, you're talking about saving $30 to $40 billion, which is less than 1% of what's in this budget. The president talks about spending $100 billion here. We've got a multi-trillion-dollar economy that needs 30 million jobs and counting, and our politicians, with all due respect, are playing tiddlywinks.
Well, look, there's no question that your point in the long term is exactly right, Dylan. But when the president shows up and says he wants to spend another $50 billion on infrastructure, I think we had $150 billion on infrastructure in the failed stimulus plan, and the president says that he wants to do more borrowing, more spending, and he wants to allow taxes to go up on job creators in January.
I get it.
What Leader Boehner said today was, look, okay, here, how about?
But why are we always playing
tiddlywink back?
But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but forget the Republicans, forget the Democrats. America is a country into which we want money to flow, investment to come, education to yield, innovation to occur. We know that younger companies, newer companies create jobs much more quickly than older companies, which means we want to have that generation. And the feeling, at the very least, when it comes to the budget and everything else, is that neither political party has the audacity to do anything other than inspire false hope on the one hand, or fearmonger on the other, or on both hands. Everybody uses both instruments, but nobody's dealing with the actual issue. How bad does it have to get, Congressman, until somebody walks in and says, listen, We have to deal with the trade deficit, I mean, you know my list.
Yeah,
We've talked.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I get that. And look, in the coming weeks, Republicans are going to unveil a very broad governing agenda that's going to deal with the full range of government reform, government spending, tax policy. Get ready for that. Okay. What John Boehner offered this morning was, I think what he was doing, Dylan, frankly, was reaching out to the president and saying, look, we hear you're talking about $50 billion more in stimulus spending. We hear you talking about letting taxes go up. Here's the deal. How about we just cut spending back to 2008 levels? We could agree on that, and we'll agree to do a 2-year extension on all the current tax policy. The president batted that back, and frankly, I think it's a missed opportunity. We could do something positive for the economy. It'd be a small step, but it'd be a step in the right direction. And what the president chose today was just more partisan rhetoric, and I think there had to be millions of Americans that were disappointed.
Well, there are a lot of folks who also are a little skeptical of your suggestion that Boehner was reaching out any more than Obama was at this point, and just through the optics of the partisan aspect. But I would like to bring up one other thing with you. This struck me this morning. I thought of you when I saw this. There's clearspending.com, which is the Sunlight Foundation. We're talking about all this spending. How much are we going to spend? We'll cut this, we'll do that, blah, blah, right? According to this most recent audit, it's unbelievable. $1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion. We're talking about 10 billion here, 50 billion there. Okay. Each trillion is 1,000 billion. As we all know, it's incomprehensible. Only the U.S. government and AIG can deal in numbers this big, right? 1.3 trillion in government. 70% of the total 1.9 trillion in government spending. So we have all this computers. Google can anticipate what I'm thinking before I say it. And yet our ability to identify and report in a timely fashion the data set that is the total expenditure of all the tax dollars of every American, 70% of it is inaccurate.
Well, look, it's high time that we not only change the direction of government on spending and taxes and growth, but it's high time that we change the way government does business. And I promise you, if Republicans are rewarded the opportunity to lead this Congress again, we're going to change the way government does business. We want to bring modernization, new technology. The American people, in the Constitution itself, the American people are promised a financial balance sheet on an annual basis that is accurate. And from the data source that you referenced, it's difficult, if not impossible, for us to get that. We can change these systems. We can get this government in the 21st century in every area, and we'll commit to that. Well,
clearspending.com, if anybody along at home is interested in looking at this and how they calculated it. And Congressman, it's always a pleasure to get the chance to talk with you. I appreciate when you make the time, truly.
Thank you, Dylan.
All right, Mike Pence coming up.